So my name's Stephen Buss, and I'm the director of the professional services group at ElectricCloud. So I've got the pleasure of just introducing this session. We're going to have a number of speakers come up and share their experiences working with ElectricFlow at some of our biggest and most complex implementations. So as you probably know, ElectricFlow is a powerful DevOps automation release platform. We manage we orchestrate the entire software delivery pipeline from code check-ins all the way through to releasing into production. And our customers rely on ElectricFlow to deliver their software faster while ensuring security, control, and compliance. So, as we work with our customers, we come across lots of interesting use cases and different challenges, and we've come up with some really creative solutions, especially for our biggest and most complex customers. So that's what we're going to be sharing with you today. We've got a terrific lineup of speakers, experts from across ElectricCloud, and we're also fortunate to have one of our customers with us, Daniel Perez, who's going to share further insights on the Hubot ChatOps integration that he's built. So each speaker is going to have about 4 minutes, and so it'll be quick. And I guess the last thing I'll say, if anyone is interested in getting a private demo afterwards, come by your booth or feel free to grab any one of us, and we'll be happy to set something up for you. Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to our first speaker, Marco.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Trying to advance here. So my name is Marco Morales. I'm the director of deployment solutions, and I've been with the company for about 5 years. For most of that time, until recently, I was part of the lead team that would help deliver the first installation, the pilots, and some initial deployments. So that's my perspective. I have quite a bit of experience with multiple different customers and engagements. So the topic I'm covering is going to be based on some of the things I've observed, and it's kind of like advice to the teams who are doing their own work now. So one of the first challenges or the use cases, when people first acquire the very capable platform, they try to figure out, how do I start? What do I do with my end-to-end process that I want to automate in this phenomenal tool? It's a big problem. It's huge. And most people want to just get into starting to write code, but we try to tell them, don't start writing or designing right away. Let's start with something a little bit better, and that is build a model. When teams don't build models, they get in trouble. And the advice I give my counterparts, my customers and prospects is, let's build 2 models. One is drop what you're doing now and drop where you want to be. Both are important. You need to know where you're starting from. People who want to just run into the thing find out after the fact, oh, I didn't know it was this way. It's good to build the model first. And then it helps you figure out what's the right model next. When you model your current process, you'll discover things you probably have never known. And that is, who owns the different pieces of the various systems? What's their motivation? Why do we do this on Tuesdays, right? It's because that's when the guy was around. That may not be what you want to automate, having someone be there on Tuesday. Find out where the deviations are. Everybody does except Team B. Because why? Because they just don't like to do that. Those are things that are important to know, and when you understand where people deviate or where they're included, you have a better idea of what next to use. And other things. There's tons of examples. We like to explore or discover those with our people. Draw it out. You'll have to draw it again and again as you learn more, but do draw it out, and you can figure out, what do I need to improve or change. Next, once you have that understanding of your current state, draw where you want to be. You have a new set of tools, new capabilities. You don't have to frame it in the old or your legacy processes, but use new techniques. Draw an architecture diagram, right? Know where your networks are. So many times I encounter teams that don't know how their network is laid out. I didn't know port 80 was blocked and we have to use port 81 or whatever it is. You have to draw out the architecture model so you know where everything's existing. Model the process. So the architecture is all your wires. Your process is how you want things to move. I want this to go from Git to something else and so on. Draw that out. Find out where the information comes. People find out that, oh, I didn't realize this is just tribal knowledge or it comes in the form of a HIP chat or an email. Model it out and figure out what's the better way of doing it. You learn a lot of how your system's going to run. This picture will change. In any given engagement, when people draw models, it changes like day by day, and sometimes the changes are really big. So don't commit it to the large 10 by 10 printout on the large scale printer. Know that it's going to be different in the next week. Once you do your desired model, my recommendation to the teams is mock it up. In our system, for those who have used it, it's and maybe any other system, it's easy enough to draw boxes, put in stub procedures, stubbed artifacts, and just let it run end to end. Because when you run it end to end, it's just hello worlds all over the place. The best feeling is seeing this great picture and everything's green. You're happy. You can see where things work, and the process of going through those steps lets you see, I see an optimization here, or this step needs to belong in the second stage, et cetera, et cetera. But you've got to run through it first because you learn so much just by implementing it the first time. It's fast. You can get that done maybe in a day, maybe less. And that's better to start with a green model than it is to start incrementing with a red one. With ElectricFlow over, I don't know how, 15, 20 months, we have DSL. So this is something that my team, as longtime users, we're used to using DSL. We're discovering that new people to the platform are starting to use it more and more. It's domain-specific language. The best part of this exercise or this workflow is you can mock up your model, export it, and then start editing it with your favorite editor, Notepad+, or some people like Emacs. And you can kind of move things around pretty efficiently. I've been on endeavors where step one needs to belong in the stage down here. Cutting and pasting is pretty fast. It's easy. You can do it in the UX, but it's a lot neater just to kind of just do it in the editor and see the results right away. Plus, you can save it to source control. There's a bunch of guidance that we can give. There's the initial DSL is machine generated. There's a lot of stubs, null, do not, empty pieces. You can cut those out. You can change names. You can re-import this DSL to your hard content, and this is something we recommend that people do it. It's a stub model. You can get away with just rewriting and remodeling it as much as you want. Refine the model. So I recommend sticking with the stubs and become more comfortable. So the platform has a lot of features for things and terms like application tier, environments, et cetera, et cetera. It takes a little bit of time to understand how we organize these projects. DSL is a great thing because the example that you see there is nesting. It becomes pretty obvious to see how things get organized. As you become more comfortable with that, you understand what the modeling and the model-based approach of the platform is like. It reinforces you become a better user. And last slide, I believe, is adapt and change your plan. You will learn new things. Most prospects, when they arrive, they haven't used features or considered what does it mean to use a model of an environment? What does it mean to have a pipeline that has behaviors, et cetera? As you learn and embrace these techniques and technologies, you'll change how you think because you'll have a new tool in your toolbox. You may have to adjust, not for wrong reasons, but for better reasons, how you use your tools. Oh wow, I don't have to write something to an XML document. I can get away from that. And those are things that I know most of us have to do in order to persist data. We may not have to do it as much anymore. Wash, rinse, repeat. Just do it again and again. The more you iterate, refine, and start building out your model, moving away from stubs, the better you'll be at understanding what's happening. And as you all know, ARA and DevOps, we require a lot of iterations. That's, I think, the end of my 5 minutes. Thank you very much. I'm passing it on to the next person.
All right, so I'm Chris Fulton, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about properties at scale. Just a really quick 30 seconds about me is I'm a global technical account manager for ElectricCloud, and I go to some of our biggest financial services customers and help them out, with implementing deployments, and this comes directly from one of those. So first of all, what's kind of the challenge with this? For this particular time, we had to design a solution that would both allow fast onboarding as well as flexibility so that we could onboard lots of completely different processes, but onboard them in a very similar manner and very rapidly, because they wanted stuff to be onboarded within a matter of months, not just one item, but they wanted 100 items within a matter of months. So what did we do to design this solution? So first of all, we had to design a solution that would allow us to create things that we can reuse. We also had to think about flexibility and maintainability, because they didn't want to just, take the solution and not be able to maintain it 3 months later, 3 years later, 10 years later. So kind of how did we implement this? And the way that we ended up doing this was by using ElectricFlow's properties and master components. And so that's what I'm going to kind of go through right now. First of all, one of the things that we used was master components. What they allowed us to do was to do the reusable part for us. We were able to create about 3 master components that would allow us to deploy all of these applications that were completely different in how they worked. So kind of how did we do this? First of all, we had a set of server-level properties. So these server-level properties that we had, because we can set properties anywhere within Flow, allowed us to, because they had very customized deployments. A lot of our deployments can fit into a nice model where you do this, but these were not that way. They wouldn't fit into a nice, run this wizard this way, run this way. They had to have very customized. But we were able to kind of combine a couple of very generic server-level custom properties. And this also allowed us, because we put this at one level, that we could put access control on them so that not just any Joe Schmuck could go and change these properties. Only the approved people can change them. So we also created application tier properties. So these application tier properties, what they allowed us to do was, if you notice inside, it's kind of hard to see, but there's a deploy property. They allowed us to kind of set a deployment property for each application tier so that we could use this deployment property then to reference that server property that I just talked about and run the deployments that way. So this is an example of the deployment procedure. It's probably the easiest procedure I ever wrote within Flow, because it's literally just a couple of steps, and the steps are essentially just referencing the application tier properties that we just talked about. So this allowed us to create this flexibility that we were looking for in a matter of a fairly quick time. We could onboard, it was about 120 initial applications, I think. And then I'm going to kind of be a little bit shorter, but my conclusion is, use the properties for flexibility and maintainability. They're definitely there for a purpose. Don't, think about what you're doing. Don't overuse them, but definitely use them. And then some resources. I'll put up some, exports of this on our GitHub within there. So if you look for all of us, we'll be doing that. And that is all I have. I know we have some other longer speeches. So.
Hi, everyone. Excuse me. I'm Urvashi Singh. I'm the lead architect at ElectricCloud. So today I'm going to talk about how you can take your automation scripts and make them part of your application delivery pipeline. So as you know, ElectricFlow allows you to plug in your point tools, your application models, your environment configurations, pretty much everything, so that you can orchestrate your application delivery pipeline end-to-end, right from check-in of the source code all the way to deployment into production. But we know that for a lot of ElectricFlow customers, you're not starting greenfield. You already have existing scripts or automation processes in place. So what the solution will allow you to do is to be able to package your scripts in a standard way. Using our notion of a container, which is not the same as the Docker container, which is more popular, but this is our original container that I'm going to talk about. And it allows you to leverage your existing scripts and be able to orchestrate them as part of your pipeline. So the solution that I'm going to talk about essentially is to be able to build a plugin that wraps your existing automation scripts, and we're going to use DSL to do that. So like Marco talked about DSL, DSL is pretty easy to use, and that is the reason why we're going to use DSL here. So ElectricFlow DSL is intuitive and a very easy to use domain-specific language that allows you to model your application release automation processes as code essentially. So here's a small example of a DSL script. So, so Chris, I bet this procedure is easier than the procedure that you wrote. So if, actually I wanted to open this up for everybody, even if you're not familiar with ElectricFlow DSL. If you'd like to read this and maybe take a guess at what it's trying to express. Anybody? Marco, you want to try?
You have a step that runs the command as specified in certain groups.
Yes, so exactly that, right? So it's, so I know nobody took a shot at the DSL other than Marco, who probably knows the DSL. But as you can see, the DSL is pretty concise, and it's describing exactly what you want the system to look like. So we're saying that there should be a procedure with a step, and the step is referring to a Groovy script. So this script could be your file, so it doesn't have to be Groovy. It could be shell script, Perl, whatever. And with this small piece of DSL, we're able to describe your procedure. So you're not really saying how to create the procedure. You're just saying, this is what I want my procedure to look like. And so the reason why we want to use plugins with this solution is, like I mentioned, plugins are our original containers, right? So they allow you to easily package your scripts or your point tools in a standard format, and they're very easy to deploy. So once you have packaged your plugins, you can deploy into any ElectricFlow server instance. They have versioning and packaging capabilities, so it makes them a natural vehicle for what we're going to do here. I know I'm running really fast through this because I don't want to take up more than my allocated 5 minutes. But for more details, like if you really want to follow the steps on how to build the plugin, you can go to GitHub under the patterns repository, and you can find more precise details on how to build the plugin, how to use the DSL, and incorporate your scripts in that. So with that, I'm going to briefly talk about the plugin wizard, which is essentially the tool that we're providing to make it really easy for you to build a plugin using DSL and be able to wrap your scripts with that. So in this tool, with a few shots or with a few quick steps, you can come up with a small directory structure that represents your plugin. So what I have here is a plugin which is called My Plugin, and we've created a directory that will represent your procedure that you want to use to wrap your automation scripts with. So here, once you have this basic structure in place, all you have to do is drop in 2 files. So one is the My Awesome script, which is going to be your script, and so I'll not talk about that. And the second is the procedure DSL itself. So if you look at the procedure DSL, this is exactly the DSL we looked at earlier, right? So it's pretty straightforward. All it's doing is referring to your script to say, here is the script I want to use as part of my procedure. And like I mentioned earlier, all the details about how to build the plugin and how to incorporate the scripts are available here on GitHub. I'll share this link at the end as well. So in summary, as you can see, with DSL and plugins, it makes it really easy to automate your scripts, wrap them up, make it be available and be deployable in different environments. And here are some of additional links that you can refer to for details. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Urvashi. I have been writing plugins for something like 4 years. That's a game changer. I'm converting all my plugins to that system. If you are an Electric Cloud customer and you're doing plugin, please take a look to that. It's really a game changer. Hi, my name is Laurent Rochette. I'm a PS architect. I have been at Electric Cloud for about 4 years. And I'm going to talk about basically how do you do CI/CD for your automation code. So the problem we have here is I'm writing some code. We are writing nowadays everything in DSL. So the question is, how do I take that code and I move it to my different environment? What do I mean is, so typically you have an ElectricFlow server that run, your pipeline, your release automation into your prod environment where you take your own code and you move it from your dev to staging, QA, prod, whatever your pipeline is. Well, the question is, the code you're writing to do that, your automation code, how do you test it? Because I cannot deploy my own code into production to run your code, because if I break it, basically you're dead. So the question is, how do I create my pipeline? How do I take my own code to do your automation through a Flow dev server, a Flow QA server, and so on? Because like everything else in DevOps, you want to test. And the code you write to do your automation, you need to test it as well. So, how do you do that? How do you ensure that the code you have, you tested it into the lower environment, and when you're going to run in production, it's going to work without problem. So what we did for one of the bigger customers recently is we basically decided to use our own artifact. We have an artifact repository. So we create an artifact. So you have different ways to do that. You can just create a shell that's going to create this artifact with all your code that you're going to push to your different environment. Or you can basically create that directly from whatever your SCM is, because with DSL, all your code is in very easily into your SCM. So you create everything, you pull down everything, and then you create your artifact, and then you can move your artifact to the different environment. And it's mean longer term, you can basically have a pipeline that's going to take that package and run tests from your different Flow server. So basically, you're using pipeline and DevOps practice for your automation code the same way you do it for your own code. So that's basically create your the package you do the same way as when you build an MSI, you have an MSI and then you install it to your different environment. So here we create basically an artifact version, and then you move that artifact version to your different basically Flow environment. So you have different Flow server that each of them kind of mimic your normal pipeline you have in prod. So in our case, we did also everything with DSL. We created basically a project, and so DSL block for each of our different projects. Then we create a DSL file for each procedure. So the idea is to keep the bit of code, small, so it's easy for multiple people to work on the code. They can work in parallel, and you also separate, as Urvashi and Marco showed, your different commands. You put them in separate file, so it's you don't have mixed code between your DSLs that express your structure and your command, which is typically in Perl or in Shell or stuff like that. So a few problems that come into you have to think about when you do that is our command to basically evaluate the DSLs that you have into the server can run on any of the servers. So what happens is when you have a cluster, our solution ElectricFlow can be cluster. So it means you can have multiple servers that act as one. Well, the problem is you need to be sure that when you evaluate that code is present on all your server, because you don't control on what server it's running. So you either use what we call a shared workspace, so you have basically a shared directory, or if you have some local workspace which is specific to each machine, then in this case you need to be sure that your DSL code end up on all the machine. So once you got that onto your machine, then it's just a matter of basically running that DSL code. So one of the problems we run into is once in a while the installer part itself, you need to modify it because it's not working as you expect, or maybe it works in dev but in prod. So you need to modify the installer itself. Well, the problem is you have kind of a chicken and egg problem. How do you modify the installer if the installer is running? So typically you have to break that into two different aspects. So you modify it and then you run it. And that's something we can really do easily with ElectricFlow, because you have this notion of sub-procedure. And so you basically just call that. Another issue we have so far, at least with the way we've designed the process, we've put everything into basically one package. So it's kind of an all or nothing deployment. So I basically deploy all my code or none. And so that's something we're going to work on to try to make that better. Because we want, especially as we are onboarding more people and we have more people participating in the code, everybody wants to basically release on their own, same way as that traditional application nowadays moving to microservice. We need to take this kind of approach as well for our own code, so our own code is easier to deploy for smaller team, and we have smaller changes instead of building this whole thing. So the other issue we have, I talk about this pipeline to move from flow server to flow server. The problem today is flow server are not designed to basically talk to each other. They're basically separated. They have their own database. So you have to, to take some additional step to basically from one server to talk to another server and re-authenticate yourself. And so it takes a little, thinking about it. So, but that's a problem we basically solve. So. As everybody showed, I have some basically some DSL. So on the left, you can see I have basically a generic procedure written in shell in this case that's basically going to call for each of my procedure in my project, basically calls the DSL on the right, and then the DSL itself is going to create, in this case, my procedure and the different steps, but it could be any object. And again, we are trying to retrieve the command itself, which are in separated file. And here the trick is to be sure we access the file at the right location, because from run to run, of course, the location can be different. So that's about it. The code is available on GitHub. And if you need more information on that, it's a problem you're running into, feel free to speak to me after that talk. Thank you. Okay, so another thing we have been doing lately, starting in 6.2, 6.3, we've included rollback into our product. So what we're trying to solve with rollback is, your deployment fail, your server in some kind of a weird state, your app doesn't work, suddenly you have ops and people coming into you and say, how do we solve a problem? So rollback, as I say, introduced in 6.3. The idea is to try to bring you back to a stable environment. So you're trying to deploy version 2, doesn't work. Instead of staying into this broken state, let's try to go back to version 1. At least your server can continue to work. It may not be perfect, but at least you have something running. So you can answer requests from customer. So in order to do that, we have this notion of snapshot, which is basically kind of taking a picture of the state of your server at one point. So typically you do that after a successful deployment. And so you're going to use that. So when it's time to roll back, you can say, okay, take me back to the previous good environment. Eventually, you can also use a non-deploy process, because depending on what you're deploying, for example, if you're deploying an MSI, you cannot install version 1.0 on top of version 2.0. You have to uninstall 2.0 and then install version 1.0. So we give you this option to basically have a non-deploy. And you have different kind of rollback, either application level, which basically take the different components in your application and roll all of them together. That's really useful when your application is composed of multiple components that need to work together. However, once in a while, you have people who have applications which have components which are kind of separated, and instead of putting them into different applications, they put them into one application. But they don't necessarily, because one failed, unroll all of them and go back to the previous version for all of them, just the ones that fail. So in 7.0, we've introduced the component level rollback, which allows you to basically just roll back those. So keep in mind, it's not a silver bullet, and I really want to emphasize on that. Yes, we have a rollback button, kind of, but it takes a little more thinking. As I mentioned, for MSI, if you want to roll back MSI, you need to uninstall them first. If you have database, Chris gave a great talk yesterday about database, you have to take some measures. So what are you doing for your database? It's not just a matter of bringing back a backup, because what happens if you have created a bunch of records in the meantime? So, you have to think about it. Also, what do you do when you have a failure on, one server out of your, 100 server? You don't want to necessarily unroll the 99 other. So you need to think about that. What happens if you have only one component out of, the 10 in your application? So, again, you may need to uninstall. If you're just copying file, maybe you don't need to uninstall. You can just delete the directory and just install the new file, or overwrite. So you need to think about it. So it's not, as I say, it's not a silver bullet. It's very, very convenient. We'll try to help you to go back to a stable situation, but don't expect the rollback to do everything for you. You need to think about it. The idea is we can help you with your process, but we don't know the details of your process. So you need to help us figure out exactly how to help you. And test. Chris mentioned that yesterday. Please test everything. Test in a rollback, test in lower environment, because you don't want to wait to be in prod and have basically a failed deployment to test your rollback. You need to be sure it works. And you need also, when you make changes, it also works when you have a successful deployment. We run into that. We didn't do good tests, and suddenly our rollback was working fine, but our normal deployment was failing. And then you run into some problems. So understand also the different kind of snapshot we have in the product. They have both advantage and inconvenience. They don't work in all the situations. So some example here that's basically some code I took from a live server. How you define your rollback step. It's some DSL. So on the left in bold you can see basically in this case I don't use a snapshot. I take an environment snapshot. So I have a rollback step. So we provide for you, a rollback step. I have an uninstall. So I have defined somewhere else an uninstall process. So that I'm going to use just before doing my rollback. And then I have different parameters for to basically call my application process to basically do my installation. And of course, I do my rollback only when I have an error. If I don't have an error, I want to be sure I don't call that rollback in my process. So I've put some code also into our pattern GitHub repository. So feel free to have a look. So again, rollback are very, very useful, but they're not silver bullets. You need to think about them the same way you think about your deployment. The undeploy, and how do you want to do your rollback? What is your process? So. Thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Avan Mathur. I'm a product manager with ElectricCloud. I've been with ElectricCloud for going on 5 years now, and until recently, I was in the field along with many of the folks who have been up here working with some of our larger customers and helping them solve problems. So today I'm talking about access controls. So what is the challenge? In ElectricFlow, we provide very fine-grained access controls where you can, set settings down to the property sheet level. You have the ability to make very complex access control models. So the challenge is designing and maintaining an access control policy that provides the right level of control, but is maintainable as well. And it limits that complexity because while you can make it super complex, on the first run, when you start needing to make changes, you don't want to, add to that complexity. You want to have it maintainable, something that you can make changes to understand when you look at it. So what are the thoughts? First, start thinking about access controls on day one. This is something I've seen, I mentioned in my talk yesterday as well, that I've seen folks who create their entire process, put a lot of work into creating a very complex system where they have multiple projects calling each other with sub-procedures, et cetera. And once this is complete, they're like, okay, now we need to tie this all down. Who's going to access it? What are the entry points? At that point, it can be really difficult to kind of retrofit in your access control model. While, of course, you can do it, it's not going to be as clean. Instead, if you start thinking about it, during your implementation, what are my roles? What are my entry points? Who's going to be running this? Then you can create those connections between those projects accordingly, rather than waiting until it's all done. So I think a recommendation to many of our customers who are going through this is to start thinking about access controls, which is not the most fun or exciting part of the whole process. You want to just get in there and start implementing and designing, but this is important. Ultimately, when you're running these things, you're working in a business where security is important. You can't just let anyone come in and run something or see something that they shouldn't. So this should also be part of your priority. So what do you think about during the design? So, you're using role-based access controls. Try limiting the number of roles to, what is required. You can, of course, create 20, 50 roles of people who are coming in, but how is that going to be maintainable? Think about, the different types of folks who are coming in. Are they a deployment engineer? Are they, a dev person? What do they need to do? And focus in on those main roles, and then create a finite list of actions that are performed by each role. So really define out who they are, what are the actions they're going to be taking, and how does that map into your implementation? And then use groups. This is kind of a given. You don't want to give individuals the access. You want to use groups, whether they're LDAP or AD groups, or in ElectricFlow you can use local groups as well, whatever works for you. If you have the appropriate AD groups or you can create them, that might be easier in your business, but otherwise you can use local groups. And then you can make changes, if there are organizational changes, you can make changes to those groups behind the scenes under the covers without affecting your access controls. And then once you have those set, identify the objects and the level of control to access. So, as I mentioned, access controls can be at a very low level, starting, at property sheets, but you don't want to start there. Start high, start at your projects, and then look, okay, if I restrict at the project level, is that enough? No, maybe I need to go down into each application within this. Do I need to look at each process where only some people can deploy? Even in your environments, the same kind of thing. And that will help you to improve, or reduce the complexity, reduce the how complex your solution ends up being. And then use factory procedures. This is something we allow in ElectricFlow to provide access to. Sorry, I have a typo. It's the principal, not the principal, but it's the project principal that can where you can give access to the user associated to a project rather than to the user directly. So you can provide controlled access to perform certain actions or to have access to certain restricted resources like an environment or a workspace without having to give it explicitly to a user and opening it up at a higher, broader level of action to that user. So definitely recommended as you're looking into this. Keep it simple. I'm talking about complexity, reducing that as much as possible. Try to keep it simple. Try to keep it, understandable, where someone new coming in can understand how you're approaching this. What are the roles and what is the access associated with them? So, best practices. This is our UI, but the best practice is to use DSL rather. DSL, I think you're hearing echoed throughout here. We all love it. You can easily add applications or new projects into your system by using your model. Just run your DSL with, put it in a procedure, add a parameter for your new project. It'll add everything that's required. You can, in one step, quickly make a change to your entire policy across your server by making a tweak to your DSL, running that procedure to apply it across your server. You can even manage your local groups, adding and removing users to those local groups through DSL procedures or scripts. Use naming conventions for sure, as you're broadening your access controls. If you have 10, 15 projects, for each project you have the same set of roles. You make it something consistent, project _ deployment manager. So then it's easy to script, to loop over all of those projects and assign the appropriate permissions. And document. This is incredibly important, of course, because while you might have it in your head right now, I guarantee you in 3 months you won't remember why you gave, execute permission to project X on procedure Y. And so understanding why you did it and making sure it can be shared and you can pass on the wonderful ownership of access controls to someone else in the future. And then this is also being reiterated across is test. Be sure to test your access controls thoroughly for every new change. You don't always understand where a small change might propagate to other things, and then you don't want a user to get this dreaded access denied error. It's not a user-friendly way for people to experience your solution. And then aside from that, it's important to test in your lower environments first. If you have that dev ElectricFlow environment, apply all of your access controls in that environment before pushing them to production. Test all of it. This is all part of your system where you don't want it affecting somebody during their production deployment. So I have a few DSL, it's not showing up very nicely, but I'll show you the first one at least. So DSL samples, where this one is creating groups based on a list of projects. So I'm looping through my list and then creating the release manager, QA, and dev group for each of these projects. Once this is up online, you should be able to see the second one as well, which is showing actual creation of access control entries for various groups. This bottom one is showing, giving everyone login access to the server. And I'll be putting these up on GitHub as well in the same repo with all of the other items that we're sharing with you today. So the takeaway, think about access controls early in your pipeline design and development process and test often. And yeah, while it can be, not the most fun part, it's important. So, focus on it early. Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Guo Zhang. I'm a customer experience engineer closing in at 2 years with ElectricCloud. And I'm here to talk a little bit about resource usage management and how you can collect some data and aggregate that from your job's history and how to find out what you need and what you don't. Now the use case, why do we care? A couple of reasons you might want to get this data and figure out what's going on in your system. Resource availability. Are your resources too busy? Are things waiting for too long? Do you need more things set up? Or another point, system management. Do I need the opposite of our first point? Do I have too many resources? Perhaps are some of them not being used at all? Can I maybe remove them? And the third point, license usage. How many of my licenses am I using? Do I need more, or am I good with what I have? Now, before we get started, I would like to clear up the difference between resource and agent or host. Now, resources are entries defined within ElectricFlow that point to a specific host, and agents or hosts are actual machines with the ElectricFlow agent installation. And the key difference, the key takeaway here is that you can have multiple resources that point to the same agent. Now, how do I find out what I'm using and collect some data on that? There's three. Now, these are not the only possible solutions, but here's three that we have. We could use built-in reports that comes packaged with ElectricFlow. It comes in a nice, easy visual format, gives you a graph, has some nice summaries about what resources are being used at what time and how many steps are running on each one. And you can also use the ECadmin plugin, which Laurent is responsible for. It's very nice. I use it all the time. If you don't have it, please check it out. It has a license logger procedure, which will query for license, the number of licenses used at any given time, and it will collect some reports on that. And the third solution is you can aggregate your own data specific to what you're interested in and what you need. Now, this is what the built-in summary report looks like. Again, it's baked in with ElectricFlow. All you need to do is click a button, and it will generate it for you. Now, it's very simple. It gives you a visual summary of what you have and what's being used. Now, obviously, if you have 300 resources, a visual graph like this is not going to be too helpful. Next, we have the ECadmin license logger, which is a polling mechanism that queries for how many licenses are used at any given time. Now, this is very useful for generating specific license usage report And because this is a polling mechanism, it will only give you an estimate of how many licenses are being used, and it won't be a 100% accurate summary of your entire history. Now, this is a very nice, easy to use procedure. It's very lightweight. It's easy to set up. It also comes in with a procedure that generates a report from the data that you collect. A third option is to aggregate your own. Now, you can collect your own data from your job steps history and build your own summary specific to the data points that you care about, such as which of my resources are not being used, or which of my resources are having extremely high wait times. Now, obviously, this is a little more work, and this uses actually the same API-based mechanisms from the baked-in summary report, so it has some of the same search API limitations. And I have 2 sample scripts that are up on GitHub. One of them it searches for the last job step to run on each resource and gives you a summary of what those steps are, what projects they came from. And the second one will actually go through your entire list of resources and add up some of the data on resource wait times and the total time being used. Now, these are sample scripts that you can use for reference. You can use them as a template. Go wild. And here's a quick summary of the 3 methods that we talked about here, a quick summary of pros and cons of each. And of course, we have some links to resources on GitHub and some documentation on the built-in reports. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Vidya and I am the support operations engineer at ElectricCloud. I've been with ElectricCloud about 6 years in February, next February. So I'm going to talk to you guys about a very key aspect of my job, which involves log analysis. And most of our customers, they want to look at the logs too. I mean, I'm always asking for them every time they file a ticket. So they want to know what's going on in there. Why do you always ask me this, right? Tell me more. So we figured, let's show you. What are you seeing and what does it mean? So what we're going to try to do is, I'm going to show you what is present in the logs that can help you monitor your performance. Yes, you're always going to have some sort of performance issue. Maybe you've launched a job that just is going to drain all your resources, drain all your memory. We don't know, so let's try and monitor that, right? And then there are other issues that you could be facing. Maybe there's a database-related issue. Maybe you're going to be not able to connect to a database. Maybe you're not able to extract the right set of data from your database. We'd like to know all of this information, and our logs are always running in debug mode. So I know it's a lot of collection. It does get some disk space, but it rolls over very quickly and zips up. So, I mean, you can't constantly keep moving them out, and there are parameters we can define for that. So what we're going to show today is which files we actually care about here. These are the different components of our actual ElectricFlow installation. The first on top there is our main server, which is the ElectricFlow server, and this is our this set of logs is pretty much defining my entire job. So the first one is the commander-hostname.log. So there are 2 varieties of this. So we can either have a commander.log, and that will just be in a single server installation. If you have a clustered environment, then you will have a commander-hostname.log, where each of those host names are representing the nodes in your ElectricFlow system. And then we have a commander service log, which gives you very much of a high-level information about what's happening with your services, what processes are running. And then you also have something called H-profiles. You may not see these as often. These are generally printed out only when you have some sort of a memory leak, or you're having you've run out of memory in your system. And then also on the agent side, we have 3 logs over there. The JAgent log, which covers all the Java agent aspect of things, and that's available in Linux and Windows only. And then we have the agent.log, which is available across all of our OS agents, OS supported agents. And then we have the service log, very similar to our Flow server service log. It gives you a high-level view of what's going on in your agent. We're not going to talk too much about the web server and the repository server today, but I wanted to just show you what other aspects are available. Both of those components have two parts. We have the repository side, and then we also have a local agent that is also installed along with your repository and your web server. So the same set of logs you see in the Flow agent side will also be available over there, except unless you're running jobs on that agent, we're not going to be using the agent.log or anything. We're just going to be focusing on the JAgent log over there. Possible issues, I think quite a lot of our customers may find this pretty familiar. So the UI is not responding. We don't know why. The server is crashing often. We're just going to keep on restarting. We want to figure out what's causing that to crash. The host memory usage is spiking, or the CPU is going high. The jobs are normally the jobs that take 30 seconds. They're now taking 5 to 6 minutes to run. We want to figure out what changed in your environment to do this, and that helps us a lot because this information is actually being printed in the logs to help you monitor your performance and your memory usage. This prints every 15 minutes, and what we really care about is at the bottom portion where I've highlighted in the red rectangle over there. That's the actual usage itself that we care about. The first line, we're actually seeing how much memory is being allocated in your server, and that's actually defined in your wrapper conf. And then we can actually say how much is being committed and how much is actually being used. So this information, you can actually tap into this information in your Commander logs and build a report on it. You're more than welcome to do that. And then other information we have here, the CPU usage gets printed every minute. So it's actually broken down by user and the system as well, so you can definitely see how much the Commander user is actually is using, and also the open file handles. We don't see that problem as often where we don't have enough file handles, but that also gets printed if you are interested in that information. The next set of issues that I want to talk about are the database-related issues, which seem to be the most common ones as well, in addition to the performance issues that we're seeing. The database issues can also lead to other performance issues, so we want to make sure that this information is being printed in the logs. All the error messages that you're seeing here, they're all printed in the debug mode itself, but we do have an additional level where we can turn on the SQL trace level of your Commander log. So every query that is being sent from the Commander server, your Flow server, all the way to your DB, all of that is getting printed once you turn on the SQL trace on the Flow server logs. The first section over there on the top is to do with database connections. So the first error message there is warning can't connect to the database. That could just mean your configuration parameters to your database could be wrong. You may just have to fix that and make sure that that's set up. You may see that only right in the beginning when you're turning your Flow server on and trying to connect to the database. The second one could not execute JDBC batch. This may be a little bit more common. You may not have the query that is trying to run on the database just may not be able to get that connection that it requires. So we will need a little bit more debugging, and that's where SQL Trace helps quite a lot, and we'll know exactly which query is actually having trouble. And then further down on the bottom here, object deletion. So the types of issues you could see there are constraint violation exception, and this is a very data-specific error message. So we're trying to delete a specific object, and maybe this is a job that is launched from this release that you just launched, and you're trying to get rid of that job. You're cleaning it up, and we're not able to delete it because we have all of these indexes, and that's basically what we're trying to. That's basically what's not permitting you to delete this object. So what happens is when you turn SQL trace, we can trace back from the constraint violation exception, we can trace exactly what query and which constraint is actually being violated, right? So that's very important. And same goes with the data integrity violation. We may have an insert statement or an update statement that is being blocked by a certain constraint. So the other one over there, the null pointer exception, we're trying to find some object, and it's turning out to be null. Maybe an ID is null, maybe a name is null. We don't know what it is, but for the most part, the null pointer exception over there is followed by a huge stack trace in the logs. So you're welcome to. At that point, we just tell you, ship it to us. We'll have to look at it. Most of the time, we'll pass this over to our dev team because they'll be able to go right into the code and figure out exactly which which query is throwing that null pointer exception. So this is the database side of the issues. And then the other pain point that I would say most customers have is when we ask for logs, it's a pain for them to collect all the sets of logs and ship it to us. So Laurent created all of these plugins for us, and they're all available on GitHub. So I would suggest check it out, try using them. I know Daniel will definitely try using this. So please check it out and have a look at it. Let us know if you have any questions. Thank you so much.
Sorry. Hey guys, is the mic working? We're good? Awesome. Yeah, so my name's Daniel Perez. I work at HPE, and I've been working there for about 2.5 years. Have you seen the slides? Either slides works. Okay, cool. Yes, been working for HPE for about 2.5 years, and my team basically deploys software development lifecycle applications across HPE. So we're talking about source control management tools like GitHub Enterprise, ElectricFlow for CI/CD, software quality tools, and my team strives to come up with a lot of innovations that help us get our work done and reduce time to implement certain feature sets and whatnot. So ChatOps is something that we've been looking at. We talked about it last year at DUS 2015. And this year we expanded it to show you how we've deployed that across our various organizations. So today I'll give a condensed version of my presentation from yesterday to see how you can apply ChatOps and Hubot to help you with ElectricFlow. So I'll just skip across some of these slides. So what is ChatOps? ChatOps is a term that was coined by GitHub a couple of years ago, and in their words, it's basically the idea of pulling the tools into a mode of the conversation. So a lot of the times an issue may happen, maybe your server usage, CPU memory, or something's going on, and you want to see what's going on, you want to identify the issues. And a lot of the times you have your monitoring tools, you might have some other tools left and right there, but there's nothing that really ties them together. So ChatOps helps you bridge that gap. If you have a chat tool, any tool out there works, like FlowDoc, HipChat, Slack. Some of you might be familiar with Slack. You have the ability to work with your peers in a central point of conversation to bring in graphs, bring in metrics, reference previous issues as report tickets and whatnot. And ChatOps gives you that ability. And one of the features with that is a persistent chat. So whenever you're in a chat room, like I said, if an issue happened before and a ticket was open, you can always reference that along with other historical data. The main enabler of this, of course, is also Hubot. Hubot is a simple Node.js server you can stand up. There's code on github.com for you to be able to stand it up as well, and we've prepared a repository on github.com for you to grab a Docker file and stand up a Hubot chatbot and plug it into a chat tool. Within the context of this talk, we've written some integrations with ElectricFlow's REST APIs. So we've got code that lets you run procedures, run pipelines, list your environments, and it's completely expandable. Again, Node.js is very platform independent. It runs on Windows, runs on Linux, and you can utilize a vast array of plugins or a vast array of libraries in the Node npm.js library to implement a lot of features. So basically, you're just using the request library. You're using the REST API. There's reference docs on documentation for you to do that, and you can kick off cool integrations and whatnot. So our particular chatbot, his name is Hammer. I think the way my coworker termed the way we came up with the name is when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. It's easy to just dominate kind of thing. So he's got a couple of baseline integrations. So looking up data information from like our Nagios monitoring platform, server statistics from GitHub Enterprise, seeing how many repositories are out there, how many users. Graphing is something that we've been putting a lot of investment into. I'm not sure if everyone ever heard of Grafana or Kibana. It's a lot of great dashboarding applications you can use. And I believe since 5.1 or 5.2, ElectricFlow started supporting StatsD metrics backend, so you can start graphing these metrics. So we've got integrations to let you, you create your dashboards on Grafana and use the chatbot to bring these graphs into the conversation. Alias commands, sometimes people make complex scripts or some scripts that require a lot of parameters, and you want to make it easy for developers and enable them to use these scripts in an easy way so you can alias your commands down. Already talked about the metrics and stats. Our bot can be funny. That's one of the cool parts about doing ChatOps. You can also, work hard and also, play hard as well sometimes. So he tells jokes as well. Persistent data. So having a chatbot that does things is fun, but having a bot that doesn't remember when it restarts, that's not a great sort of thing. So HeBots lets you persist data using various brain components. In this case, we're using the Redis brain. It's a simple key value pair database, so you can enable that. They've got Mongo brain as well, and I think they might even have an Elastic brain, I'm not too sure. But when you're writing scripts that, for example, you want to write a script that talks to Yammer, and you got to remember the user's API token to be able to execute commands on their behalf, you can write your integration to securely store that in Redis. Redis can be password protected, and every time it restarts, you can continue using those API tokens. When you're standing up your chatbot, you want to make sure that you implement it in a continuously deployed fashion. So in our case, we're using ElectricFlow to kick off the automated deploys. We're using GitHub Enterprise to store the source code, and we're using that pull request model to, you create a pull request, your changes are in, it gets verified, and once it gets merged in, it kicks off our deployment pipeline. We're using the HeBot webhook listener to listen to pull request events. Once it detects that the pull request is closed and it's merged successfully, it kicks off a deploy to the ElectricFlow to then deploy the chatbot itself. So it's a very helpful way to set it up. Key technologies, as I mentioned earlier, so we got ElectricFlow for our CI/CD type pipeline to deploy the bot, and also we're using ElectricFlow or chatbot to give us information about ElectricFlow. We're using Nagios as our comprehensive monitoring solution. I believe Nagios has a plugin called Nagira that lets you take the metrics, the performance data that Nagios shows you on a dashboard and offers them in a REST API fashion. So it's easy to write HeBot integrations to grab that information to the chat room. Docker, we've deployed HeBot as a Docker container. So you can just blow away the Docker container. As long as you got your volumes that are storing the Redis information and Mongo information, it can persist across. FlowDoc is our preferred chat tool. There's a lot of chat tools out there you can use, but we like FlowDoc's inbox feature. It basically grabs a lot of data that you're putting into the room, but not into the actual chat flow. It keeps the chat flow and the actual integrations information separate so that you're not confused. But you can also reference things back and forth. Grafana, Kibana. So Kibana, you can analyze logs. We just talked about analyzing logs. You can write really awesome log filters that then you can start visualizing. So, hey, how many times did a null pointer exception happen, or how many times did create procedure call, and you can start visualizing those in graphs. Same thing for Kibana. These are a couple of technologies out there. Got a fun little slide here. People like to automate all the things. It's great to do that, but sometimes you got to sort of see where the benefits are at. If it's something that you're sort of doing like 2 or 3 times a day, that's when you should probably start saying, hey, maybe I should automate this. Maybe I should write a HeBot command to sort of make it easier for me to do this. But if it's something where you're writing an integration that the bot itself is going out there, grabs the data, stores it in a database, and then does something with it, if your bot dies, you're sort of stuck. You want to make sure that you sort of separate or have a separation of concerns with that. So what we typically do is, like we said, we have various chat tools out there we have various tools out there that have all these sources of information, and we write HeBot to grab that information and put it in a cohesive way. So you don't want to put that single point of failure for that. So quickly go over some design considerations. HeBot itself is a lightweight server, so you don't have to have something too complex or physical. It can be in a cloud server, a Docker container, be a simple 2x4 or something like that. You definitely want to Dockerize your bot, so it helps you deploy it that fashion. You don't want to tie it to SCM. You don't want to have multiple versions of the code across your developers. You want to have a central repository for that, so we use GitHub Enterprise for that. And like we've mentioned before, keep it simple. You don't want to make it too complex. You don't want to be in a single point of failure to where your bot is down and you can't do anything after that. Keep it chat agnostic. So there's FlowDoc, there's HipChat. If your security team all of a sudden decides, hey, FlowDoc is not the way to go, you can easily go to different tools out there. One other important thing here is security. Security is everything. You really have to have that security hat in mind when you're implementing ChatOps. Of course, a lot of these tools are hosting data in third-party premises. They're not inside your company, so you want to make sure you're conscious of what you're putting in the chat tools. You want to make sure your security team verifies and validates the tools. In our case, we had a bunch of tools that we verified with our security team, and FlowDoc was one of them, so we're using that. HeBot offers Express framework. That's the web framework they're using to expose. They've got like a port you can use for talking back to the bot. So you get basic authentication for that, and you can set up an NGINX reverse proxy to ensure secure communications. The environment file, so you're writing integrations to different tools. You got passwords, you got variables, you got stuff like that. HeBot has a HeBot.environment variable that you write. You typically want to use application accounts. You don't want to use your own personal accounts and passwords on that. You want to secure the file itself, so only the bot or the user that's running the bot is the only one that's able to read that file. And also role-based access control. There's a framework called Hubot Auth within Hubot, where basically it lets you write your scripts in a way that defines roles. So only if you have the deploy role will you be able to run this command. And if you tie that in with the access control mechanism from ElectricFlow, when you have your application account run your procedure or your job, you want to make sure that that account doesn't have God mode access to run anything, because that would be bad. You want to make sure you tie down the security and use both that access control on the Hubot side and the access control from the ElectricFlow side. And one last thing, again, if your company does not support the fact that, hey, you're writing internal company data or intellectual property or information into a third-party service, there are chat tools that let you stand up the chat tool inside the company. So we've got, I think, Mattermost and HipChat offer enterprise versions of that as well. So yeah, pick a tool, a chat tool that makes sense for you guys. Make sure you create your automated pipeline to quickly deploy your chatbots. You want to make sure that you're writing data that's simple, that easily accessible and understandable. You don't want to overflow the chat room with that conversation, with data that doesn't make sense. Not everything needs to be automated, just things that are quick and easy, quick wins for that. And make sure to onboard your team members as well. You can write a lot of commands out there and they can be complex or simple. You want to make it easy for your developers to run these commands. So quick stats, I think we started onboarding where we have about 10 applications onboarded. We've got 70 plus active commands that we can use in Hubot. 30 plus developers, we have hundreds of calls to the bot sort of at a day, and we've expanded to a bunch of teams out there. So I think we're over time. But yeah, so I'll be around. I have a laptop with me so I can show you our actual running of the bot itself. I asked the team member to post a picture in our chat room, but I don't have any way to show it. But essentially, I want to be able to show you guys how we've created our dashboards and how we're using chatbots to grab that into the conversation. And I think there's a talk later today, Brian Price and David Page, where they're showing you how to write or create dashboards in ElectricFlow. So if you're writing these dashboards in Grafana, you can bring them into the chat room in a great way. So yeah, that's it for me. Thanks. I think there's time for Q&A, but I'm not sure if we've gone too far.
People have already run for rounds.
It's all good.
But if anybody has any questions.
You can find us around. Yeah.
Here, and there would also be a recording of Daniel's full talk about chat-ops from yesterday sent to our attendees. There was a very sexy demo in that, and you can see the full scope.
Oh, last thing. There's a repo on GitHub Enterprise, or sorry, GitHub.com. Like I said, it's a Docker file. You can stand up your own chatbot, and it already has the active integrations to fire off a job in ElectricFlow, get the job information, run schedules, stuff like that. So feel free to fork and contribute back. Yep. Cool.
All right, great job, everybody.
Yep.